Anambra State's widely acclaimed peaceful governorship election was marred by violent incidents, including the fatal shooting of a councillor in Owerri, Ezekwala, Ward 1. Unknown gunmen killed the local official while he attempted to cast his vote around 1:30 p.m., sparking community outrage despite heavy security presence. Simultaneously, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission arrested 3 individuals for alleged vote buying across different local government areas. The suspects were apprehended while reportedly attempting to influence voters with cash inducements during Saturday's poll. These incidents occurred alongside the generally peaceful election that saw Professor Chukwuma Soludo declared winner in a landslide victory. Well, for an assessment of the entire process in Anambra State, Faith Nwadishi, Executive Director, Center for Transparency and Advocacy, joins us from Anambra State, while Taiwo Olapade, journalist and public affairs analyst, is here with us in our Lagos studio. Good afternoon, both of you, Faith and our guest right here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start with you over there in Anambra State. What's your overall assessment of the voting process across the state in spite of these few incidents of alleged attempted vote buying and one case of a man being shot?
So the election in Anambra didn't come as a surprise because generally elections in Anambra are peaceful on election day. Between the hours of 8:30 and 2:30, when election really happens, you hardly have issues. It's quite unfortunate that we had that issue. We also reported a case of one of our observers that was injured by the police between the hours of 6:30 a.m. and 7:50 yesterday morning at Ihiala. But generally, the election has been peaceful. I've been here for 1 week, so I was able to observe the atmosphere before the election, very close to the election, and yesterday on election day. And it's true that we had issues of vote buying. In fact, what we saw yesterday were different dimensions of vote buying. You now have citizens negotiating with party agents how much they want to collect. There was a particular polling unit we went to yesterday, and the young people were standing by. They refused to vote. And when we interrogated them to find out why exactly they didn't want to vote, they said they were offering them 3,000 naira. And so they thought that 3,000 naira was too small for their votes. They were negotiating and waiting for the officials to upgrade that. So, and then you also see where notes are given to people. Right now, they're not taking too much money to the polling unit. They give people notes to say the money can be transferred to you, or you can go to a particular store to get groceries that is what. So food vouchers have been included in all of that. But generally speaking, the people came out. The turnout was very low. It was quite peaceful. INEC officials came quite late to the polling unit. Between 8:30 and 9 o'clock was when they arrived. But again, the police were quite professional. They arrived quite early to some of those polling units. They were there before the INEC officials, but you wouldn't say the same for the political class, because the political class, I see that they're just more interested in the outcome of the election without truly investing in the process that leads to that outcome. For instance, in September, we're here to conduct voter education. You didn't see any of the political parties, conducting voter education. Then at the end of election, you see there's some invalid votes because people were not properly educated on how they should vote. That should be the main responsibility of the political class. On Thursday, there was distribution of sensitive materials to the different local government areas. 16 political parties fielded candidates for this election. There were only 7 political parties who had their party agents at the field on Thursday. But you see, for the distribution of sensitive materials, they were going to the 21 local government areas. So you would expect that each of the political parties will have at least 21 party agents who would escort those sensitive materials to to the local government. And then coming to the polling units yesterday, the same thing happened. We're seeing in some polling units, we're just seeing 2 party agents, 3 party agents. But when you see those party agents, for instance, when you go to a polling center, the Anambra University, the Garuba Square, they had about 5 polling units within that polling center. You will see 1 party agent who is overseeing the 5 polling units there. So there was no proper investment in the process, but looking at the outcome and then the money that was invested for vote buying by the political class, it just shows that when you do an analysis of the effort of the different stakeholders along the electoral circle, you find out that increasingly the political class have not helped to make or improve the reforms that we're looking out for in the election, even though they are the beneficiaries of the outcome of the election.
Very good, Faith. I would like you to stay with us, but we have Taiwo Olapade with us in the studio as well. Taiwo, it's a major essence of one major feature of this election is the calm nature of it, despite a few skirmishes here and there. What major cues or takeaways do you think this election has shown, or if you'd like to analyze from that perspective, for Nigerians, to the electorate to get a grip with?
Well, thank you very much. Of course, the isolated case of this, the guy that was killed, that was shot, quite unfortunate, and that occurred towards the tail end of yesterday's election. But in talking about takeaway from this election, number one, the election that brought Governor Soludo into office a few years back, about 3 years down the line, the man scored about 112,000 votes. Out of, then it was around close to about 2 million registered voters for that governorship election. But yesterday, we saw a bit of improvement, though not to our expectation in terms of about 2.8 people are registered for this election, and unfortunate that just around by give and take 20-22% of the number of registered voter came out for this election. And in the long run, Professor Charles Soludo, who was declared winner and returned elected, got about 422,664 votes to be declared winner, while the APC candidate got almost about 100,000. So if you look at it from the very first election that brought him into power, about 3 years down the line, and comparing the figure, the statistics, to what we got from yesterday, we can see a bit of improvement, though not satisfactorily what we expected, because from about 2.8% to 2.8 million registered voters. And we are now talking about Soludo, all the votes put together, including the void votes, I'm not sure is up to about 700,000. So where are the remaining registered people who also collected their PVC? Because in the build-up to this election, INEC also was so glad that they recorded about 98.8% of the registered voters who collected their PVC. But how come they still shy away from exercising their franchise at this very important off-cycle election in Anambra State?
Absolutely. Based on that point, we're going to come back to you, Faith. You mentioned that, for instance, that the INEC officials showed up late to the polls. The security officials arrived before they did. And now we just heard what Mr. Olapade said about in spite of 98.8% of registered voters who collected their PVC, there was low turnout. We also know that you stated that there were cases of vote buying, people not trying to exercise their right because they didn't get the amount that they were promised. When you put all these together, how would you compare to maybe the expectations of what we wanted to see from INEC, especially when we consider that there's a new INEC chairman and this was his big test?
So thank you very much. So on the issue of vote buying, really you have to put that at the doorstep of citizens themselves, because if the citizens are not willing to sell, I don't think the politicians would want to make money available. But again, when you look at that, when we were doing our analysis last night and trying to understand why we have these new dimensions and new thinking around vote buying, you see that citizens come out to vote for a particular candidate, and down the line, once this candidate is elected, the elected candidate or the elected person doesn't come back to those citizens to ask if I want to decamp to another political party. So citizens are feeling that, well, if we're coming out to vote for a particular person, it is about how much, what is the incentive, how much can we get, how can we hold this person accountable. The issue of accountability does not even come to play. So you look at all of that, and then when you also assess the preparedness of INEC on the issues of logistics, you want to be able to ask the electoral officers what went wrong. How come that ad hoc staff were not able to arrive on at the polling unit when they were supposed to be there to open polls at 8:30? When we asked them, they told us that there were not enough vehicles. So you're looking at the role of the vendors and what they are doing, working with INEC on delivering of all of this. Do we continue to work within NURTW and the other vendors that bring vehicles? Why is it that at the end of the day, they're not even bringing good vehicles, rickety vehicles that we saw yesterday, bringing all of these people? So before you can do that assessment, you need to really look at what were the plans that were on ground and the reality that we saw happen on election day, and the role of the other stakeholders put together. And you know, when I spoke earlier, I talked about the fact that the political class increasingly have not shown more commitment to the reforms that we need to get on this. And when you talk about the issue of vote buying is an electoral crime. We had a meeting with the Commissioner for Elections a day before, Commissioner Shogun, a day before the election, and we're trying to bring to his attention that some of these electoral offenses that happen on election day, citizens see them, the INEC officials are not able to see them, but he insists that it is INEC officials who must come to report that an electoral offense has happened before they can escalate it. So these are areas that we need to really look at, fine-tune, to be able to assess what performances we have had. And also to say that the new INEC chairman that came in has built on what has happened, because this election timetable came out a year ago. And increasingly, all of the activities that were supposed to be on that election timetable were done as at when due. Until yesterday, we had the election. So it's about going back to reassess and see what is working, what is not working well, what is it that we can do forward. And when people say that this is a litmus test for the new INEC chairman, I disagree. I say this shouldn't be used to test his performance or not. He's just been 2 weeks in office. Things have been put in place. Let us see what other elections. FCT election is coming up in February next year. Let's see how far we can go with that before we begin to put pressure on the new INEC chairman.
Very good, Faith. And building on what Faith said on the issue of logistics for INEC, I remember, the previous election that brought in the incumbent, now the winner of the elections. I remember you had in densely populated areas very few materials for the INEC officials to work with. In fact, it took him several hours, and the election had to be extended slightly for him to even vote. And I think, being the gentleman that he wanted to portray, he allowed at least a majority of his ward members to get their votes in. But between that now and that scenario and now, in terms of logistics, we saw a little bit of improvement on the part of INEC in that direction. But how can we build on this? There's still major areas that needs to be, and there were also few cases or incidents of the technology being used. The
beavers.
Yes,
Beavers machine.
Yes, we didn't hear too much hiccups regarding that. So something must have happened between the previous election and, like she said, it took a year to get this prepared. So your thoughts on that?
Well, the bottom line is, for logistics, I think INEC, particularly for this election, Anambra election, I think they have not really done well. And I say this because they have a long time to really plan for this election. It's just off-cycle election. We are talking about election being conducted in 21 local government of a state. We have 36 states, the FCT, and if you put all this together, 774 local governments. So we are talking about 21 local government areas of the state, and INEC had enough time to really plan and ensure that the needful is done. And that's why some people have also rightly suggested that why not also take some responsibilities from INEC. Let me just conduct election. Logistic-wise, we know we have a couple of people operating interstates. I don't want to mention names, but we know we have them with good. See what Madam Field mentioned, that they even came with rickety vehicles to convey election materials, ad hoc staff, INEC staff, and the like. And whether you like it or not, they must have also been mobilized to also deploy their vehicles. And yet, they also came with rickety vehicles. Sometimes they don't also come early enough. Sometimes you don't even see them after being mobilized. So why don't we give this responsibility for some companies that we know that have reputation, they have integrity, and they have the wherewithal to really, deploy vehicles at the right time and at the right places, so that we won't have this recurring decimal of hiccups, vehicle breaking down, vehicles not getting to destination, the voters are on the queue waiting for ad hoc staff to arrive and the like. So I think INEC should go back to the drawing table. And for those who are also clamoring that let us take some responsibility from INEC, because I think they are biting more than they can chew. So I support that argument that we can give this responsibility to all these, the local, whatever, that can really handle it and do it perfectly well.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Now, Faith, I know that you're not necessarily an analyst, but you've observed this election. From what you're seeing on ground or what you witnessed, do you get a sense that the outcome of this election might be challenged by any of the parties that also participated, whether it's the APC or others that took part in it?
I have not seen any election in Nigeria that has not been challenged, even when people know that they did not prepare properly for that election. So it has become a culture that every time there's an election, people come out to say we have challenged it, whether it is about, meeting the expectation of their supporters. Sometimes when you become a candidate of a political party and along the line you step down for another candidate, you tend to lose some of your supporters. So going to court has become part of that. And, it baffles me why some politicians go to court when they know they have not done the right thing. For instance, we're talking about party agents at polling units. You did not deploy a party agent to a polling unit. You don't have your result sheet, because if you have deployed a party agent to the polling unit, and I keep saying that elections are won and lost at polling units, you don't have the result of the polling. You don't have the result of the polling unit. So on what basis are you going to court for? And it's quite because the law has decided to leave the responsibility of deciding who wins an election to the judiciary. People just feel that we have to go to court. And over the years, you see that when you lose an election, that election is not a good election. But when you win, it is the best election. Everybody is celebrated. Everybody has done so well because you have won that election. You remember that yesterday when most of the candidates were on the field, they were accusing each other of vote buying. Everybody that came out say, this person, there's vote buying going on. Who is buying the votes? Who is making money available for votes to be bought? So at the end of the day, what we see happen is that after every election, rather than looking at what will work, what will help our position the next time, people are looking at, how much did we spend? What did we do? And I tell you, yesterday we were having this conversation and somebody said, if election results are declared and people were giving money, certain amount of money to pay for certain votes in certain places, and then once the results are declared, that amount of money you were giving, they didn't get that number of votes. You will have to come to account for it. But as soon as the person wins an election, the person who embezzled that money goes ahead to spend that money. So that's the system that we're finding. That is the system we are having. So you see that increasingly, what we see happen within the Anambra election, the next election, you will see people, up the amount of money that they're going to give to citizens. And citizens hear all of these things. There was somebody who said, I didn't see anything happening yesterday, but every observer, all of the polling units that we observed, where we had the reports and all of that, there were different cases of different ways that people were giving. There was even a particular polling unit that the supervisor came querying the party agent there and told him, we gave you money to give to people. Why are you giving people 2,000 naira? So you can imagine that this is what it has become, an impunity, because nobody is holding anybody accountable. And when such things are happening, security agents are watching, they're not doing anything. The next time, people will want to do much worse than they did the last time.
Indeed, and we also saw how the people themselves were trying to protect their vote by actually waiting till the end of the elections and to see the votes being counted, as it were. We saw that in many of those areas. And on that note, Faith Nwadishi, Executive Director, Center for Transparency and Advocacy, and of course, Taiwo Olapade, political analyst. We'd like to thank you both for joining us on the show to reflect on the Anambra elections. Good to have you with us.